Minutes are approved as corrected.
That's correct.
Okay, next up is report of the student representatives, and we have one person left here.
Sophia just left.
No, I'm sorry. We have the bills first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We need to,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to move us forward.
Bills.
ACS bills.
Bills were read on 9/30/24 by Jason and myself. The first is the general fund for $1,486,687.11. Huge number again. Of that, $360,000 was to the counseling service, and $618,000 was to dental and to BI. Okay, as I've done, pointing that out. And the second is on that date is the payroll of $1,046,791.30. Second bills were read today by, again, Jason remotely, and he remotely too. He was somewhere further than I was at home. But in any case, the general fund this time, a little nicer number, $200,876.77. There was a McGilton Fund warrant for $3,000. And there was a payroll warrant for $1,081,481.11. Jason, I presume, found no problems, and I didn't either, so I say we accept the bills as read.
Okay, and is that a motion?
I guess so.
Yeah. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. So yeah, if there's no objection, then the bills are approved as reported by Chip.
Thank you.
Okay, now report of the student representative. Thank you.
Hi. So I guess maybe since we've missed, I guess, like a good amount of time. I think in the past couple weeks, it's been really hard at school for a lot of people. I think everyone felt the loss of Mr. Bartlett really, really deeply. The support that we got from administration, I think, was really appreciated. His memorial was really beautiful, and I think, and everything that was in our school, in the hallways, everything that was done for him was really, really appreciated. But yeah, the mood was just really sad, I think, for the past couple of weeks. And that was where a lot of people's focus was. And then, on a more positive note, the little break that we had on Thursday and Friday was really nice. I think it was a good little reset to help fight maybe this sort of burnout that I think a lot of people have, and as we get closer the holidays, November, December. And then on Wednesday of last week, juniors went to the college fair up in St. Michael's, and I went as well. And that was really, really cool. I felt like I learned a lot of good things, and there was a lot of positive feedback on that. And on that sort of note, there's a lot of positive feedback, and I think a lot of the juniors really appreciate what the counseling office is doing with having colleges and all the representatives come in, and I feel like there's a lot of good opportunities, so that's really awesome. That's all.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Thank you for your report. Okay, next up is report of the superintendent.
So in terms of the personnel appointments and resignations, one I want to draw your attention to in particular is Roxanne Green. She will be joining Ripton in the position of associate principal. This is not a position that we have currently. We're moving forward with a particularly kind of targeted model to support Ripton Elementary School. So Roxanne, who spent time as a teacher in Bridport for a number of years here. Yeah, and she has had experience as a small school principal and also as a behavior interventionist and instructional coach. She was interested in coming back to the district and actually as an academic interventionist, and was very interested in being able to have the split position. So Bjarke Sears will be remaining as the acting principal. It will be his name that we'll be forwarding to the Agency of Education for their official record. He'll handle anything that may come up that is particularly difficult, either staff or student issues, and also will ensure that any district pieces related to NEASC or IB reauthorization or any of that happens for administrators who are sort of deeply embedded into the work of Madison Central happens in good stead in Ripton. And Roxanne will report to Bjarke, and she will be there on a daily basis. She will be signing POs, approving leave requests, handling basic student behavioral issues, supporting things in the classroom. Courtney will continue to support the 3 classroom teachers with their goals of their supervision and evaluation process, which is kind of nice for her to do since she is on the design end of that system and not as much on the user end. And others will be picked up, either by Bjarke or others in that realm. So hopefully with that combination, she will be at a 0.5 in the principalship, which is consistent with where Weybridge is. And then she'll be doing 0.5 intervention in the same building in that way. And both of them will be meeting the community tomorrow night at the open house. So I just want to make sure that I highlighted that particular appointment for you.
Could I ask one other question regarding personnel into how we're going to staff Derek Bartlett's important position?
Yes, so we have Colleen, her last name is,
Rehnquist.
Yes, thank you. I didn't want to get that wrong, who has come out of retirement, and she's covering that classroom right now. So Caitlin is determining with her how long she feels she can stay in that position, and then what the plans would be for that moving forward. So I'll be talking with her about that later this week. Yeah.
Thank you. Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you need a
Yes, I need a motion.
I'll move to appoint Kelly Davino, School Nutrition Assistant 1.0, Roxanne Green, Associate Principal 0.5, Academic Interventionist 0.5, Christy Jennings, Paraprofessional 1.0, Kaylee Manning, Paraprofessional 1.0, Tina McMahon, Custodian 1.0, Christopher Shaner Jr., Custodian 1.0, Claire Schreiber, Learning Center Clerical Assistant 0.4, and Melinda Smith, Student Services Administrative Assistant 1.0.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, if there are no objections, then the appointments are approved as read and included in our agenda.
So tonight is Student Services Night in terms of other just kind of information from the board as a whole, and that comes to you in 2 pieces. So Nicole is going to lead you through some of the elements of student services programming, which is not all encompassing, but she's just going to kind of give you a sense of what we're experiencing this year in that area. And Matt is going to take over at some point relative to the financial aspects, and that'll count as budget driver 102. We talked about kind of the general ed side of things when we were together last, and the finances associated with thinking about that. And he'll tonight turn your attention to student services programming. So go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Would you prefer that we do questions throughout or hold them to the end?
I'm so sorry.
How would you like questions to happen?
Let's hold them maybe to the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Matt is going to do the clicker. Thank you, Matt. So special education, October 2024. So there are 3 things we want to bring to your attention as we've discussed in district office about what we think would be helpful to understand. The first is special education and the growth of mental health supports and services across the district. The second is how ACSD is responding to mental health needs in special education. And the third is the special education funding and staffing. Before we go to the next slide, this is a really hard presentation to make because the way we think about and talk about mental health these days, there's a concerted effort to depathologize it, to accept that everybody struggles at some point in their life and nobody should be shamed or feel wrong or broken for needing supports or services when it comes to mental health. And any of us could need it at any time. And we also, this presentation is happening in the context of a school, and the federal government and state government have language that does sound pathologizing, that does sound like there's something wrong. And so I'm going to make every effort to use the language of schools because this is the school board. And I just want to name anybody who's receiving special education services for mental health they're not broken. There's nothing wrong with them. They're no different than any of us. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so mental health support and services and ACSD. So we have 2 growing needs, and I thought I'd start off with definitions. And you'll see that infinity symbols because these 2 areas sort of, they're interconnected. The federal government defines 2 areas for mental health: other health impairment and emotional disturbance. You can see why the second one would be the most pathologizing thing. Most of us don't even like to say it, and it is the category. These 2 categories encompass diagnoses like ADHD, anxiety, depression, PTSD, and neurological disorders. They are most commonly referred to these days as neurodivergent learning styles because all they're doing is accounting for differences in executive functioning, emotional capacity, and a particular need for sensory supports. So if the federal government were to change its language, hopefully that would be what it would talk about, is that these terms, these diagnoses are talking about differences. They're not talking about broken people. So these 2 categories intersect with a new category students are now eligible for in Vermont, which is functional skills. Functional skills was not part of the eligibility in Vermont, and now it is. And functional skills includes personal care, personal self-management, responsibility, respect for diversity, safety practices, and friendships. It's a very broad category. Okay. So here is a chart where I'm trying to show what's happening. Let's see how I do. Blue, what I've done is I've taken our percentages and conflated them so that ED and OHI are blue. And then I'm comparing it to SLD, which means specific learning disability. Specific learning disability really encompasses typical reading, math, writing. And so what I'm trying to show you is that over the past 2 years, the mental health categories have grown and are even growing more than reading, writing, and math. And then if you look on the far right, the most recent statistics I can find for the nation as a whole were 2021. And you can see the difference between Addison Central and the nation in terms of identified mental health supports in an IEP. You'll see a little bit further on that this is a somewhat typical comparison when we look across the state of Vermont compared to the rest of the country.
Sorry, I want to ask, can you just identify what we're looking at on that slide? That's students who have these diagnoses or students, these are
students who are eligible for IEPs because in blue, they meet the criteria for ED or OHI.
Okay.
And those are all the students in blue. And then red are students who qualify for a specific learning disability, which is reading, math,
But this is based on IEPs.
only IEPs.
Got it. Okay.
And so here we have similar information, and we're looking at it by grade level. Your screen sharing gets in the way, but essentially, on the left, the first one, you're seeing elementary school.
There's no good ones.
In blue. So you can see that from elementary school, it grows. So this category that's referred to as emotional disturbance grows, doubles from elementary to secondary. Similarly, OHI, other health impairment, does. And then you can see that's just the total in our school district. And then I thought it might be helpful to see the gender difference. So what's happening in Addison County? So for those of you who don't know, the Addison County Health Needs Assessment just came out. It's super fascinating. The parts of this felt like the most relevant slice, which with all this data they collected, that youth are another population that need increased support. This was a common theme in their study. When people were asked to choose the top ways to strengthen schools and other places where people learn, their top choice was to increase programs for people to be mentally healthy. And here's an example of some of the data from their survey. So on the left, Addison County high schoolers who felt sad or hopeless. So just looking at 9 through 12, 30% in Vermont, 24% in Addison County, 35% female, 13% male. And again, this is survey data, although it's pretty rigorous survey data. And then 46% for students who identify as LGBTQ and 16% for heterosexual cisgender. And then on the right, I just thought it would be helpful for us all to see what people are saying about being able to access mental health services in Addison County. So the one on the right is not about students, it's about the population at large. And I thought it was interesting, the differences, and that there's still, even with white, non-Hispanic, 25% of the population who feels they can't get the services they need. So here we are in comparison to Vermont. So the data that you're seeing here is from 2016. That's the most recent that I could find for the state of Vermont. So that's pre-pandemic. And this is consistent with conversations at the statewide level. So the way you want to read this is, for the category emotional disturbance, the mean is 16.8 and the 50th percentile is 15.7. The lowest in the state is 4.6, the highest is 34. So I thought it might be helpful to see how we compare, although it was long enough ago that, again, it's not entirely valid. And then other health impairment, similarly, 20, 20, and then 6 and 35.
These are percentages?
These are percentages.
And we only have raw number, or do we have percentages or raw numbers? On slide 5.
Percentages.
That's percentages.
And this is statewide.
This is statewide.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you want me to go back to slide 5 for a comparison, or?
Yeah, because
Okay,
I didn't know that those were
Yeah.
percentages.
What are we?
Yeah, so that's 30% ED and OHI. Okay.
25%.
So this is ACSD specifically.
Yes.
On the two left.
And so right now we're in the 30s.
And sorry, just to be clear, this is IEPs or IEPs and 504s?
IEPs.
Only IEPs.
Okay, thank you.
Next one. So 2010 to 2018, 2010 on the farthest left, 2018 on the farthest right. This is a comparison of Vermont to mostly our neighbors. I'm not sure how Delaware and Kentucky and South Dakota got chosen, but they're on there. To show that Vermont overall seems to have the highest percentage of students identified with emotional and behavioral disorders. So that's not including OHI, it's just emotional and behavioral disorders. So what's happening in Vermont? So I think the best language that explains it most coherently is the 2018 state funding report for special education. And what is in that report is that we have the largest share of students with emotional disturbance of any state in the nation. That's students' anxiety, depression, PTSD, and neurological disorders. Nearly 3 times the average seen in neighboring states. The share of our students with other health impairments also exceeds the national average, but is on par with neighboring states. And so these quotes stood out as reasons people were citing across the state. The nature and extent of student need has grown more severe, as well as more complex. I don't think that's going to surprise any of you. Intensifying student needs and weak in-house capacity to serve students. Weak funding for comprehensive and early support systems. An increased demand for mental health services has been met with limited service capacity. And the somewhat cryptic mobility of high-need students with IEPs has created challenging adjustments at the local level. That last one is naming that there can be a common experience that people will move to Vermont with an understanding that services are more readily available and are a little bit more rigorous. And finally, I wanted to put it in context with the whole nation. And so the CDC had this great chart. This isn't about schools. This is about young people. So you can see, so depression and anxiety in the land of IEP are both considered emotional disturbance, that awful pathologizing term that does nothing for anybody. So depression grows, anxiety grows, and as do behavior disorders. And that's percentages on the left. They're still considerably less than the students percentage-wise that we identify. So how do we respond? So I thought it also might be helpful to understand the differences in what we do and how we do it. I realized in reflecting on this with Dr. Baker that conversation hasn't come to the board. So if Matt wants to flip forward. So one of the ways an IEP works is we provide access, and we provide access by accommodation, which is also what a 504 does, and the 504 stops at accommodation, whereas an IEP will go on. But students on IEPs receive access through accommodations, and that removes a barrier to access. The way I think of it is it makes it possible for you to do the school thing. We move things out of the way because of your disability so that you can do the school thing. And so when we think about OHI and ED, this is a helpful graphic to just say what it means. So on the left is symptoms of anxiety, on the right is symptoms of ADHD. So these are common accommodations that we provide for students. In both, you can see it also takes some teaching, and sometimes it doesn't. So for instance, the ability to color or draw, we don't necessarily have to teach someone how to do that, whereas using positive self-talk could be something that we teach you how to do as an accommodation. For ADHD, extra opportunities for movement, we rarely have to teach kids how to move, but we might have to help kids understand how to chunk their long-term projects so that they can figure out how to get it done on time. And so these are accommodations, which is the first part of an IEP. Then we have access by specialized instruction. This is the part that 504 doesn't go into. There's nothing else in the educational landscape other than an IEP that provides specialized instruction, which is a very specific term. In the state of Vermont, we define it, this is straight from the regs. It's instruction that's planned It's directly related to an IEP goal. It's designed to close the learning gap. It's monitored, and it's specific to that one student. So here are some examples of what it looks like on an IEP. So I tried to stick with symptoms of anxiety and ADHD. The top one is for symptoms of anxiety. This is a goal. It's a goal that none of our students have. I found a place that had good goals. When feeling overwhelmed by assignments, the student will use agreed upon accommodations such as extended time or quiet space and successfully employ these strategies in 90% of instances throughout the school year. So that goal, to meet that goal, the special educator and other people on the team are working to make sure that the student learns their accommodations and figures out how to use them successfully 90% of the time. The second one for ADHD is by the end of the semester, the student will demonstrate increased ability to focus and complete tasks independently during a 10-minute period with no more than one redirection from the teacher. That being the idea that we're helping students to increase their ability to focus and complete tasks, which directly relates to symptoms of ADHD. And then by the end of the school year, the student will increase the ability to take notes during lectures, discussions, and readings. So these are examples for students who are on IEPs of what their goals might look like that are designed just for them and are implemented just for them. So this next part is showing you the programs that we run. There was a time in Vermont where they were called therapeutic. There was a time they were called alternative. I'm deliberately calling them specialized because that's what they are. They're specialized. These are programs for students on IEPs. And the best way for me to think about them, it's when an accommodation becomes universal. When that thing, like having movement many times throughout the day, when that just becomes the universal practice that can characterize a specialized program. So here are the 4 common things we can say about specialized programs. It's what makes them special. They focus on particular skill development. We have custom social interactions. We have personalized instruction and support, and we reduce distractions in a predictable environment. For some students, these specialized programs would be highly restrictive because they would prevent you from accessing your education. And for a small portion of students, it's the opposite. This is what makes it possible for students to access their education because they're in an environment that has focused in on skills, social interactions, the environment, and personalized instruction. And so it's considered least restrictive. It's considered the thing that helps them learn. I don't know if you all have seen this chart before. So we made this chart last year to help us all wrap our minds around our specialized program. On the far left, in IEP language, there are categories, and the category that comes first and the goal for every student is general education at least 80% of the day, meaning there's only 20% of your day that you wouldn't be with everybody else. And so I just named all our schools because that's our general education environment. For students, for some students, they're accessing the general education 40 to 79% of the day. So it can look like anything from half the day they're not in the general ed environment or almost the same as the least restrictive. MUHS has an Aspire program, grades 9 through 12. MUMS has a Wellness and Learning Center. I believe it includes 6th graders, 6th through 8th. Mary Hogan has an autism support room and a Wellness and Learning Center, and then Ripton has a Wellness and Learning Center. And so those students who access those specialized programs are not in those programs all day. They're in those programs part of the day when they need to be there, and when they don't need to be there, they're not there. And then the orange is really anyone who's under 40% of the day. And so we have 3 programs First is the Addison Central Program, ACP, 9th through 12th. Addison Central Program 2, 6th through 8th. And then this year, we started Addison Central Program 3, which is also called 208 Charles, because that's where it is. And we've gone back and forth. And that's 7th through 12th grade. And then separate school, public or private. So we have a number of students in grades 3 through 12 who go to out-of-district placements, Baird, Mill School, South Point, Sheldon Academy. We have some residential placements. And I did note at the bottom that for each of these, the transportation is about $100,000 a year per student. And then finally, for those of you who don't know, when we can't find placements for students, we provide temporary tutorial services. We don't pretend that that's good for anyone. It's not what we want students to get. And sometimes when we have wait lists, it's what we can do. And so we work on hiring really good people to provide tutorials for our students. And this is our K-12 student staffing, emotional behavioral. So this is as of September. So this green and the yellow is saying these are the staff that are in the general education environment working with students and IEPs. It goes alphabetical for elementary, and then mums in the high school on the far right. And then I think hopefully what I can show you is we have a range of services. The difficulty with the chart is that special ed services aren't divided equally. They're divided on where the need is. So if you see discrepancies on the chart, like you see, what's a good one? Behavioral consultant, you see 2.0 for Mary Hogan and you see 0.16 for the rural schools. That's based on identified needs. Same with special education paraeducators. There's a lot of discrepancies there as well, a lot of differences. And then here's for our specialized programs, ACP and 208. So there are 2.4 licensed special educators and 1.0 provisional. Their average caseload is 6.5. We have a contracted BCBA. We have a 2.2 school social workers, 4 behavioral interventionists, and we have 3 alternative program administrators. And this is a chart I assumed everybody would look at after. I really want to get the, oh, I forgot you did this for me. Matt Carenti found a way to make it more digestible.
Shouldn't have called it basics though.
Still.
The details.
So here are the details. So I thought it would be helpful for you all to see for each program. So the elementary WLC, it's not new to ACSD. It is new as a hybrid. ACSD used to have self-contained programs at the elementary level. What we've done is we've changed that so that students aren't stuck in a program all day, but can leave the program and go to their regular classrooms, and their teachers can also get support. Special educator, we either have a behavior specialist or a school social worker, a paraeducator, and a principal, all who support the elementary WLC. What's specialized about it is it's throughout the day in collaboration with the general education teacher and staff. And then I thought it would be helpful to know who it's least restrictive for. It's least restrictive for students who need specialized instruction to build emotional capacity in the general ed classroom. So this program is designed to help kids build their emotional capacity. Similar with the mums and the high school WLC, very similar. And then the next one. And then ACP1 and ACP2, I think you all know this. This started out as a joint collaboration with CSAC and Addison Northwest and Mount Abe, and it changed over time. This is the first year that it's fully a part of ACSD, and Mount Abe and Addison Northwest tuition students in. It is a self-contained program, so there's not access to the general education, and it's for students who need an entirely separate setting to build their emotional capacity so that they can then return to the general ed. And lastly, the newest, 208 Charles. It's brand new. The idea was to build a self-contained program, 7 through 12, to help students be able to transition throughout secondary and into post-secondary life. ACSD was struggling to meet those needs, and we thought long and hard about it. Caitlin, Michaela, Matt, Ben, Lear, Courtney, a whole bunch of us came together and said, what can we do? And we decided to build a program to ensure that our students, our most vulnerable students, received the supports they needed.
Can we get an updated version of when the preceding 3 slides on the other programs aren't in the version we got today? So we just
Board pack
We
is
have
not the same.
this one.
Board pack didn't have all the slides in it.
Yeah, sorry. These are just load up zoom ins and everything's on here.
And we didn't
don't
have
have
that either.
yeah,
Okay.
we're just missing a few, and that's great information.
Yeah,
So I just wanted to make sure we get
Yeah.
the final version.
So why do we build our own programs? So on the left, we build our programs because we can build higher quality, more inclusive programs. That's probably the number one reason. There are also very few options for specialized instruction in Vermont. The cost of transportation is exorbitant. When we don't have specialized programs, it feels like we're not doing the right thing, and we all know it. In the schools, with parents, with board members, with principals. And finally, we build our own programs, and Matt and I thought it was really important to name, there is a tension. There's a tension between our legal and ethical responsibility and the financial realities of building our own programs. And that always exists, and it exists now. And then if you look on the right, this is in general. So Addison Central, the seat cost for a student, it's about $50,000 for a specialized program. If we were sending a student out of the district, it would be about 80. These are broad numbers. There are some programs that are much more than 80. We include transportation, and out of district would be an additional $100,000. And so we're looking at a difference of $50,000 to $180,000 when we build our own programs. And right now, with 18 students, we're looking at a total cost. This is for our self-contained programs of about $700,000 versus $3.4 million. And it's still costly. And we're still trying to figure it out. So finally, for those of you who don't know, help may be on the way. So Vermont has passed Act 630 to improve access to high quality education through community collaboration. In New York, it's known as BOCES, Boards of Cooperative Education Services. And the intent is to transform our system to ensure high quality education, keep things sustainable and transparent. And so it allows, I don't know what the next slide says. Does it say this? Yes. So these are the things that it would allow us to do. Starting in 2026, I believe. Yeah. Provide shared programs and services on a regional and statewide level. So we would be able to build programs beyond Addison County. We could partner with another county, or we could just keep it within Addison County. We would get some startup funding. We can define BOCES as a public employer, allowing for employee organization. In other words, those employees would be the employees of the BOCES, not of our school districts. There's the answer, 2026. We can consider establishing them by 2026. And then we can get additional funding and evaluation for the community schools program, which is a particular definition for comprehensive programs. And I just noticed there's a typo. It's BOCES. I almost wonder if Google fixed that for me. Sorry about that. Do we want to hit, pause?
Yeah, questions.
Yeah.
Is there anything, since this last slide you presented, there's obviously synergy across the state. Is there anyone from a state perspective taking ownership of bringing us all together? And
That's a
paying
great
for it?
question.
I'm sorry.
Well, so I'll try. So I can say that for the Champlain Valley Special Education Administrators have gotten together and have actually brought all their data into one place and built a comprehensive report for the Superintendent's Association, who actually came to us and said, what can we do to help? And so I know within Champlain Valley, there's a real,
That's a start.
yeah. In terms of, is there the state that's, I defer to Wendy if.
I don't think at the state level they've put something together to help sort this out quite yet.
Yeah. I had to ask the question. Thank you. Jamie.
Thank you. Thanks, Nicole. I'm looking on slide, what?
10.
This is slide 10. Okay, slide 10, ACSD comparisons of Vermont. I'm curious if the relative, our higher percentage of incidences of, I think you called it OHI, is like potentially a reporting bias. Like, do we identify and blah, blah, blah? Like, does that?
He's the slide before, Matt. I can just see on his computer. It's the one
On this one.
Or a slide after, sorry.
There.
Yeah. Is this good information? Like, are we identifying, and I don't know what the other word would be, at a higher rate with greater sensitivity and blah, blah, blah? Do we have any idea if that's possible or not?
The way I hear special education directors talk about it that resonates the most for me is that in Vermont, we really know our kids.
Well, like you had the other slide with the bubble, the quote bubble. I forget where it came.
Yeah.
And see that one on the top right, mobility, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
And it makes me think that you think people are coming to Vermont because they think we know what we're doing. And that would lead me to believe that we have a greater infrastructure and we have identified more, we have more familiarity. And therefore, we're in some ways, there's kind of almost like a magnet effect. And so I'm just wondering if this biases our state of affairs relative to other places.
Does it bias us? Our evaluation team uses a rigorous process that's grounded in law and neurobiological evidence to identify students. And so they identify students who have the need, who need access. These quotes here are what the state of Vermont's funding survey, what they said that people across the state see.
Right.
I don't think there's anyone in our district who's identified who doesn't need the support or service. Or we may be more likely to identify kids because we know them so well because we're a small community.
Okay.
That's entirely possible.
Okay.
It's also entirely possible that sometimes special education is known for barriers that people like myself deliberately try to block people.
Yeah.
And we work really hard not to do that. In fact, we have an open evaluation process, which is unusual. We started about 2 years ago where if you ask for an evaluation, you get an evaluation. Whereas in some states, you have to jump through a lot of hoops to get there, and that has a chilling effect. So it's hard to know. There are so many variables.
Okay.
And it's consistent across the state.
Ellen, and then Mary Heather.
I'll try to be concise because I know that we're running late. But I think that the narrative of this whole presentation, including with Matt's piece, is the need in Vermont is growing, it's great, and the cost of meeting those needs is growing and great. I'm really worried about this data on slide 10. And the reason is because if these were if these were overdose rates, if this was any public health data, and we're looking at New Hampshire, which is demographically larger but very comparable to Vermont, and we are 100% higher than them on this sort of indicator of need, then that begs huge questions. And date and self-reporting and diagnoses and how that makes its way into educational plans make me very worried about overusing this data or anything that sort of says that I have huge questions about, like, why is Vermont apparently has the largest share of students with emotional disturbance of any state in the nation. I assume that's a per capita estimate. But I think that as we are thinking about budget season, as we're thinking about everything that we're talking about in the finance committee and then among the full board, we need to really carefully discuss things like this and understand what we're saying and how we're comparing ourselves to other states and other districts within our state. The dates of the data, I think, matters a lot, because I think this is all true as far as the needs of students. And I also worry about us saying kind of loosey-goosey that we're like Vermont is way out ahead, or without being able to explain it. Like, I think we would really need to understand a lot more about why that's happening, which I actually I'm not getting on slide 11, like what is happening in Vermont. I understand that our funding models aren't great, but I have a million questions about why we are so much ahead of apparently Kentucky or South Dakota. And so again, I think it's really important to understand how the needs of our district and in our state have grown in this area, and to not make false comparisons, or to understand the comparisons that we're drawing and really where it's coming from. So that's my main concern, was sort of understanding more of these pieces. And then I would just say, Nicole, you said on slide 24 that there's naming a tension between the legal, ethical requirements of providing what we do through these programs and financial realities. I'll just say, to look at that chart that you guys have, I don't feel tension at all, right? In the sense that $700,000 is a lot of money, but compared to $3.4 million, it's a huge savings. So again, this is not a criticism of the presentation so much as how we're thinking about this. And I think if these programs are meeting our legal and ethical obligations and also saving millions of dollars for what we might otherwise be spending, that's really important for us to embrace and widely discuss.
I think I'll just chime in and say that this chart is pulling some older data, and when I present, I've got some updates to this. So you're going to see the higher cost and the higher per student cost. There's still a substantial savings, but I just wanted to add that caveat now while we're talking about it. I think to your point on the tension that I think we were referring to in that last bullet point is the idea that when we run an in-house program, it is a fixed cost. It's a fixed cost that comes with a certain number of permanent expenses to the budget, whether that's a facility, a lease on a facility, position creations, and everything else. That if the need goes away on a year-to-year basis, you could potentially be holding the bag on a lot of fixed costs, where if you're just paying based on whatever your need is on a year-to-year basis to out of district, you might wind up realizing a savings for two reasons. One, you might see a year-to-year fluctuation or drop in need, so you don't have to pay because you don't have a need. And there are no spots available.
Right.
And so you might wind
That's
up
the key.
sending kids to a tutorial program that costs, $200 a day or $400 a day instead of the
Something
big
real.
ticket tuition and transportation. Yeah. And that's the reality, is that there's perhaps a tension in that.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks, Matt.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to go back to the chart that Jamie pointed out and that Ellen pointed out, the slide, where the percentages are so high for Vermont. And I guess, I'm having the same question about, what do these numbers mean? Why is that? Are we identifying more kids because there are in fact more kids with disability, or is there some problem with how tier 1 has been delivered, whereby kids who might have a propensity to struggle are now meeting the threshold for IEP because they're failing bad enough? to now qualify for an IEP. I mean, to me, these numbers bring up all kinds of questions about how we're delivering education in our district, and how we're specifically how we're delivering education in the regular classroom, and how we're the process by which we are in fact identifying these kids, because there's clearly something different happening here, and that needs to be an element of our moving forward, I think, because I don't think it's just that we know our kids better. I just don't buy that. I think there's something, there's other things happening here that is part of the story, and I think it does behoove us to question what's happening and really understand that, and think about like how we are delivering what we're delivering as we're developing, our resource distribution and our learning environments and all those things. These numbers concern me.
So
and they make me wonder about other things.
I will say that these numbers and the 2018, these were all the numbers that existed before Vermont changed its funding structure.
Right.
So and there have been no numbers since that change.
Mhm.
So one of the main reasons Vermont changed its funding structure, meaning having a census block grant versus
Right.
fail to get services,
Right.
was because of these numbers. That doesn't answer the why. I'm happy to provide resources. There are a few people in Vermont at UVM who've tried to dig into this and figure it out. None of it entirely satisfactory, I would want to pretend. But this is what led to the change.
Yeah. Thank you.
Jamie?
Well, I'll just clarify just something. I can imagine looking at this if I was in Kentucky or South Dakota and being like, there's also something wrong here, or something's going on.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So because I started this chart, I was not calling attention to what I thought was a potential problem. There's no way. The difference between Vermont and Kentucky and South Dakota is almost certainly a reporting bias, because
Delaware.
Or Delaware, right? But the discrepancy between Vermont and Maine, or Vermont and New Hampshire, is more interesting to me, I guess. And I'm just curious what
Or Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. Yeah, right. So it would be interesting, because so many of us have centered on this, how we can learn more about, because as Mary Heather said, as we go into budget season, we're going to be talking about this, and we've already brought up the tension and the expense of the programs or whatever, and I feel really good about paying for services that we absolutely need. Like, I feel, as you were sort of saying, I just don't feel any tension there at all. But I would like to be more to understand more about what does seem to be kind of like a standout situation.
So I have three questions. One, the slide where you talked about ACSD specialized programs. You say, when is a specialized program the least restrictive setting? You say there's when accommodation becomes universal, but my question is, if you put students in a program where the majority of their time, or all of their time, is out of the regular ed classroom, away from their non-disabled peers, that is the most restrictive environment you can place them in, because they are not with their non-disabled peers. I believe that's also part of special ed law, but I could be wrong. Under your slide, K through 12 staffing.
Would it be helpful if I responded to that?
Well, you don't have to tonight, because I know
Okay.
we're growing short on time.
Okay.
K through 12 staffing slide, you don't have any special educators on there.
Yes, you're correct.
So it's all the work being done by paraeducators, which the state has called us on?
This slide was written both before and after the weekly spotlight with all the information about staffing. And so we decided to focus on the staffing for just emotional behavioral and take the special educators out of it because it had already been seen.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then you also talk in some of your slides about collaboration between general ed and special ed teachers, making sure that the students in these environments are actually getting the same education, or at least working on the same standards that their non-disabled peers are. So, at some point, I'd love to, give an example of what that looks like, because in the past, we have lost programming because we said that was happening when it wasn't actually happening. So I'd love to know more about that. But my questions are more in-depth, so you don't have to answer them today.
Anyone need a break, or should
We can keep going.
Keep going.
Pass
I
the
get to talk about the
cookies.
money part. So this was the third section, if you remember the first slide when we kicked off. As Dr. Baker pointed out, we're sort of talking about the drivers, continuation of the first budget presentation and what's happening financially within the student services and special ed budget to drive the budget this year. And there are really sort of some things that are adding revenue, some things that are saving money, and then there's some things that are adding costs. And so we're going to look at kind of how all of those combine to create a driver. To start, here's our FY25 student services budget. You can see we have a major section there for teachers, big chunk for paras. On the left, there's an $830,000 chunk for CSAC contracts. Those contracted services are social workers, behavioral consultants, clinicians.
Yeah.
Where you see outplacement tuition, that's a portion of the budget that's kind of held in reserve for some of those out-of-district tuitions, special ed transportation, and such. The first driver that we're going to talk about deals with our largest federal special ed grant, which is IDEA B. IDEA B is used to handle special ed expenses, and here's what we used it for in FY24. Combination of teachers, administration, so this is where our special ed directors are funded through. A little bit of clerical for all of the sort of maintenance of effort that goes into tracking everything here, and then the benefits for those positions. So it was a very 100% position heavy investment in the IDEA B grant. The thing about federal grants is you have to pay a surcharge of 26% on every dollar that you use a federal grant for in salary, which is called Fed Visters. It's a retirement surcharge that exists to help support the federal pension plan. You don't have to pay that if you're not using the grant for salary expenses. And so we said, what if we flipped this and used it for something that didn't have anything to do with salary? So this year, our entire investment to date is for virtual SLP services, which is a purchase service through a provider that does virtual SLP. It does two things. It fills the need for unfillable positions that have been vacant for years in Addison County and statewide. It's a real statewide shortage. So it helps us access those services, and there's a net savings by moving positions out and moving purchase services in. The other is there because we don't know what the investment is going to be, because SLP is a variable. And so as we near the second half of the year and get some data on what our spending is on SLP, we'll be able to tell what can we afford to put into that remaining chunk, if any. And here's everything that I just said. Down. The net savings is about $146,000. Just by switching those two things.
Matt, just the 26%, is that on an unfilled position that you would have used the grant for if you could fill it? See, I guess I'm,
No, it's
A
filled.
grant, if you had a grant position that wasn't filled, you'd use the grant for something else, because you wouldn't want to
okay,
grant
all
money.
right, I just saw it, it's only if you have that filled position, then that 26. Wonderful.
The next driver is our therapeutic or alternative programs. I'll get my nomenclature aligned here. So here you can see a breakout of the 3 ACP program budgets. And this is the slide that I was referencing when I said that there was a difference in cost between the 700, which is on that first slide, and the 1.4 million, which is on this one. That largely stems from the addition of the third program and some of the reworking of the costs since we stopped being a cost-sharing collaborative and started doing these on our own. For each one of these programs, we calculated a seat cost by dividing the maximum enrollment by the total program costs. We also, on this slide, highlighted what the administrator and the facility cost. And the reason for doing that is because administrator salary and facility costs are not eligible for extraordinary reimbursement. The state says if you are spending a lot on an individual student and you pass the $67,000 mark per student, you're eligible to receive 95% reimbursement for every dollar above 67. Except you can't count administrator or facility salary. So backing those two things out is how we calculated what the excess cost eligible expenses are, and then what we would project to receive as excess cost reimbursements. That's just that 10,000 there. The remainder is the district cost, and that's again where you can see that bottom line total of 1.4 million for the 3 programs. That's a driver. The next one is the census block grant. So if anybody's been tracking this, it's been stepping up every year from FY24 to FY27. The increases in FY24, 25, and 26 are due to a inflation-related escalator that basically takes the old model and transforms it into the new model. And so they set uniform base amount every year, they change the uniform base amount every year in 24, 25, 26 based on that adjustment factor. And then in FY27, it will just be the uniform base amount. And the way that we get the census block grant calibrated each year will be the uniform base amount, which applies to the whole state, times our number of students. Is it identified students? All students. Okay. So the next driver is the net effect of all of those things. The other question that I was asking during this was how much of the special ed revenue that we receive offsets the costs of special ed and student services. Does anybody want to guess? If you've read ahead. I thought it was interesting. So here you can see we divide our special ed and student services budget into programs. These are from our chart of accounts, and they allow us to keep tracking on different types of expenditure within the cost center. So we have Program 21, which is our reimbursable. That's sort of the old language, but the main special ed program is 21. Sometimes there are special ed expenses that are ineligible. These sometimes are like 504 related expenses where there's no IEP, so you have to call it ineligible. That's a very minor one. We have pre-K special ed, which is sometimes referred to as EEE. There's a grant that we receive, and then some of it, you can see the grant there is the top, and then some of it comes from our general fund. And then Program 11, this is sort of the student services portion that moved in last year. this is actually, there's no offsetting revenue. I just get the top to not be green. But it is 100% generally funded here. And then this last piece is the additional expense that was not part of the initial FY25 budget, but came in after the fact as a result of that net effect. You can see some of it is offset. That offset is the increase in the census block grant. Overall, most of these costs are the ACP program that was added. So here it is in a table. You can see here's where we started. We brought extra expense in because in FY24 we had some students with new IEPs whose transportation costs were not coded to special ed, and we're assuming they're going to be this year. Here's the line where we see the savings realized by the Idea B displacement. Here's the line where we see the unbudgeted alternative program expense. And then here's the adjusted student services budget. This is the net expense change of $618,000. Here's the new revenue that we're seeing from the increased census block grant. I think this might actually have a little bit of Medicaid in there, but it's between 400 and 500,000. And then the total new local fund liability of 200,000 after we offset the expense with the new revenue. Placing that in the overall scheme, you can see here are all of our programs. Here are all the offsetting revenues that were on that chart that we just looked at. And here is the total student services general fund. Here's the adjusted total amount, the total offsetting revenues, and the remainder, which shows us that 58% of the student services budget is funded by non-student services revenue, or non-special ed revenue. So pretty high amount. Put another way,
That wasn't depressing enough.
this is the same data, just re-summarized here. Student services costs are 42% covered by the revenue that we receive from them. If we were to take that student services budget and divide it evenly by all ACSD students, which of course is something we never do, because these are individual need-based expenses. But if we were to prorate the entire budget across the entire enrollment, it would be a price tag of $4,250 per student. I realize now that you all haven't seen the presentation where we talk about price tags. Don't worry, that's going to be coming up when we talk about budget drivers at the next board meeting. The finance committee has seen this, so that's why I'm mentioning it now.
That was also really a happy meeting too.
Oh.
I think Nicole wanted to sneak a thank you in here.
I did want to say.
Yeah, and
Thank you. But first, how about you do?
I was passing the mic to you to do your thank you.
Okay, thank you for passing the mic. So as part of consolidation, the special educators, the special ed directors, and the principals have worked really hard to bring us into compliance. Because we were in so many schools that weren't consolidated, we all sort of read IEP law in a particular way. And what comes after my big thank you, I feel like it's in there. As of May 2024, thanks to all of these people, special educators, special ed directors, teachers, the eval team, we're fully compliant in all areas of special education monitoring, which means we're doing the right thing in the right way for kids. And I just want to acknowledge that all of these people had to learn new ways, had to be really flexible in their thinking and really trusting, and they deserve just a huge thanks for all their efforts. It's a big deal.
So this is coming from the state that we're 100% compliant?
Yeah.
Chip.
Referencing that 18% above the mean of the state. Obviously, there are districts that do not meet,
Absolutely.
all right, and are figured in to that mean, which seems totally unfair
Totally.
to those of us that are meeting
Working
those
hard, yeah.
standards and
Yes.
paying for what it costs to do this.
Yep.
So I mean, we can be congratulating ourselves, it's true, but we're also we're gonna be a victim of these numbers, I think, down the road, because the state's not gonna let us do it, period.
Mhm. Yep.
At least, maybe not in special education or anything else, but in general education,
Yeah.
that's where it's gonna come
Yeah.
out.
That's where the tension lies, right?
Yeah.
That's where the tension is.
Totally. Questions? Yes, Helen.
This is more of a comment, and it's definitely not a request of anyone who works for the district. I'm just thinking out loud again, thinking ahead to the budget. I don't want anyone to hear this as like a, can you please do this? But I do think it would be really interesting, and maybe the finance committee could talk about ways of leading on this a little bit, but to start to try to explain how legal ethical obligations related to special education have evolved in Vermont in conjunction with changing needs as diagnosed and assessed and incorporated into data in Vermont. And within our district, if we can do that, but maybe at the state level is more realistic. And something that tracks state and federal funding for those needs and for those requirements. And because I think it's really important that 58% of about $8.4 million is coming out of our general fund. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that that's wrong or that shouldn't be our responsibility as a district. But I think there's a way that we can be talking about that, because I believe people feel very frustrated by the cost of education. And it's opaque and it's mysterious. Why is it so expensive? And I don't think special services explains all of it, but it's a huge budget driver, and it's one that we are required and that we should be providing. And I think that there's a lot of information to what you're saying, Chip. I mean, that part of it is that great, we're 100% meeting what the state believes we should be, but how does that factor into an understanding about what does or doesn't come from other sources? And the responsibility that falls to local taxpayers to make up the difference. So again, not a request, because that's I don't know of any and all of that it's at all possible, but I do think we should be thinking about that, or some version of how we could tell that story in the spring.
Yep. Joanna, and then Mary Heather.
I guess my question is, how does this increase in need in mental health services play? How does that conversation happen with the universal learning design? So we've heard from Heather Gibo with literacy, and that's UDL. And so are there conversations that are happening, and what are they?
It's so great that you're asking that question. Just today I had a meeting about how we can come together to identify the universal core standards that we want to tie to. There currently aren't any, so that we can say these are the things. So in the world of IEPs, there's early learning standards, but that's for young kids. And then the state of New York has core standards for social emotional, but Vermont doesn't. So yes, we're actively talking about it and trying to figure it out.
I also think your new wellness policy has some of those components as well. I mean, and I think, probably when Caitlin talked about the purpose of the new schedule at the high school, there were some mental health components of that were put in place, for students and staff. That's also true for the schedule changes as that happen at MUMS. So I think there are a number of structural pieces in place that are looking at trying to provide better access. But other health impairments is the fastest growing, category of identification we have. Am I understanding that right?
Yep.
So, it also seems to be one that the more years that's like, it's, the older you are, the more likely you become, versus other disability categories where the younger you are, the more likely you are to be identified for something. So it's kind of interesting to think about that and think about the way that we play out supports in our universal pieces as a
Seems
whole.
even more important.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Mary Heather and then Jamie.
Yeah, I guess I just want to follow up a little bit on Ellen's comment because I think it's a really important point as we're talking about budget development and the narrative of need in our district and how we're supporting that need. I think, the fact that so much of our student service resources are provided by general funding really does underscore our responsibility as a board to look at how efficiently we're doing our general education so that we can meet the moral and legal obligation to rise up to the need in our district. So I think we need to be cognizant of that, and we need to be able to talk about that as well as we move forward in the budget season.
Jamie?
Class sizes.
Yeah, I mean, or any other means by which we have to be spending our dollars very wisely so that we can, our strategic plan really identifies this in particular as a big priority for our district. And so, this is our obligation. And even if, there's not as much federal funding or whatever supporting these things, these are the priorities. And so, we've got to be pretty clear-headed and eyes wide open about, how efficiently are we spending our money in the general education setting? Absolutely.
Jamie?
Thanks. I had a question about the BOCES. You said help might be on the way. Like, how likely is that? Basically, I'm not sure what you mean. Like, it sounds like it's coming, but I can't tell if it's maybe coming or if it might be helpful. Like, what is the?
Yes.
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 Okay. And then my second question is, I don't know how to. My second question is, I don't know how to ask this, but like, do we think we are developing a budget that will meet the need that we are outlining? Like, is that what we're doing here? Like, or do we expect that we will develop a budget that will not be enough to meet the need that we are talking about?
One of the things that Nicole and the student services team is going to need to consider are we putting together programs that are as efficient as we can make them? And I think one of the things that this district was caught by surprise by is the dissolution of the collaborative. We expected, if I'm understanding it correctly, to be paying a third of the cost of some of those ACP programs, and we're effectively paying the vast majority of that. So that's a substantial difference. And I think, in light of that, and in light of the other districts, decision probably not to continue in that mode, we really need to look carefully at what our other options are for a number of things. I think, to Mary Heather's point, we also need to be looking at the ways that we can strengthen our universal instruction, because right now we've got some patchwork trying to hold up the bottom, when really, if we're focusing on the way that our first instruction is delivered, there is less of the cost associated with student supports that's not disability related, but is just students needing that boost second time around. And so I think there are those kinds of conversations that the principals are having. I noted that a little bit of that in the spotlight today. So that's going to take us some time to work our way through. I think we can do some things more efficiently. We need to do that. So when we bring you a first budget, it needs to be most efficient, effective budget that we can put together, given the changes that have taken place between last year and this year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So if it's okay, I'd like to move forward on the agenda. Next up is report of the chair, and the primary item under here is the superintendent performance review process and evaluation instrument approval. And I'm going to let Suzanne walk us through that. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention October 22nd. Is a time when there's going to be listening sections in each of our schools. And it's really important to have board presence there. And I've asked Tricia to really help orchestrate that to ensure that we do. And she'll talk a little bit about that. But, you know, it's something that I really need folks to clear their calendars and listen and bring that information back. And it's going to be critical, I think, as we're getting together and talking about the budget, to make sure we hear what's the thoughts and the fears and whatever that are out there.
You're going to talk about that?
Briefly, do you mind if since you've opened the door, do you mind if I take
We could do that.
So as Barbara was saying, October 22nd, there will be budget meetings held simultaneously or very near to in all of the towns in our district. So I believe, Wendy, you said the one in Middlebury will be here at the high school.
Yep.
And then each of the rural schools will also hold one at the same time. So we're hoping to get a board member at each of those meetings. It would be great if you could attend a meeting that is not your hometown. So if you could email me, hopefully that you are free on the 22nd.
What time?
Starts at 6.
Great.
There's an administrative presence in each building, so you don't have to worry about that. There'll likely be some light snacks as well, though that maybe not the cookies may not be quite to this caliber, but Steve's up for a challenge, I'm sure. And all you need to do is just listen, to what it is that people would like to share with you. There's no information to be presented. It's not that. It's just listening, and perhaps if people can put comments into the survey that are collected that night, then the finance committee will review that information from that survey in aggregate the next day when they meet, and we'll begin to kind of put together sort of some at least draft fiscal benchmarks, from that based on kind of where we are. So board ears would also be really helpful to have along with administrators.
Tricia, so if board can email me, if you are free that night, please email me. Once I get everyone's responses, I will respond with the town that you should hopefully attend. Does that make sense?
I have like an hour of availability. Is that better than nothing?
Yes.
Or is it
Well,
worse
at
to
least-
leave early?
Yeah, at least let me know.
Okay.
Let me know, and then
Maybe in that case, there's
Distribute.
room to have 2 board members, since
Yep.
there's 13 of us, and there's fewer than that meetings.
Are you, Tricia, are you dead set on board members not doing their own town? One reason I'm asking is that night I have a meeting in Bridport that gets over just about 6, so I couldn't necessarily get somewhere else.
Well, so put that in your email to me, because then again, you may be the second person at Bridport, right?
Yes, Chip.
So the premise is, and how does this get disseminated that this is happening?
So there are many ways. There'll be an op-ed that's in the Addison Independent that has the letter that I wrote with the invitation. It's going out on Front Porch Forum, social media accounts this week, all family distributions. And Emily has a plethora of ways that invitation is going out.
Just so that in fact, people know that they can come and express their grievance. They're not going to come and congratulate us, okay?
Right.
So in actual fact, they're going to say, my property taxes are too high, lower them. And so it's not a straight line, as we found out. So, I mean, I think all this stuff is fine, but I think it's not going to change what we have to do.
No.
Well, and our role is as listeners at these. I mean, this is the this is the Wendy's side of things, not our side of things,
Yeah.
right? These are sessions that Wendy is organizing and putting together, and the board has an opportunity to attend and get that information straight from the horse's mouth, as it
Yeah.
were.
So we'll
So,
get it.
right.
Yeah.
So it's an
Yes.
opportunity for us to connect and get.
And
the
I think it's
information.
important from the community perspective to see us there.
Yes, very much
I'm
so.
not knocking any of that. I'm just,
People
as a
there.
listener, we can listen.
We'll refer them all to the finance chair, Chip.
Yes.
Chip, there's also, there are a number of questions on the survey. And so those questions, there'll be printouts of those. And some of those will help people to get down to the bottom of what's your greatest priority,
That's the direction.
Yeah, just a little bit, so that if there are things that are really important to people that they'd like to share for consideration in the first draft of our budget, as opposed to us presenting a budget and then saying to the committee, what do you think of that? At least, we'll be able to consider any information that people are able to share with us ahead of the preparation of the first draft.
Years ago, we used to do this,
Mhm.
and it was always, what kind of a percentage increase you want? That's how simple it was.
Yep.
Okay, it's
I
not
remember.
that way anymore.
No.
So
Joanne.
When is the survey gonna be sent out?
It's being sent out this week, probably what is today, Monday. So I think Emily will start tomorrow and it'll go out for the
So there'll
remainder
be
of the
like
week.
a week of
Yeah.
that having.
Yeah, and it'll all the responses are due by, I think she has 9:00 on the 22nd, so that the finance committee can kind of consider it in the aggregate in the morning.
Oh, so it won't be open when we listen. We
Yes,
can't
it will.
say.
It will.
On the
Yep.
23rd, it'll close.
It closes that night at 9.
So you have
So
to put
9
the information in
p.m.
right
Okay.
after the meeting.
Got it.
yeah.
Good to know.
Okay. Thank you. So now I'd like to turn it over to Suzanne.
We're going to do a quick perusal of the superintendent evaluation tool draft. So it seems like eons ago
It was.
that we met with Judy, and some of you might remember this handout, or the one from the Lincoln Public Schools, or there was the Addison Central School District one, there was the one from the Career Center, and we kind of all gave some input as to which ones we thought were better and why, and then we said, well, executive committee, you can work with the superintendent and figure it out. So we let Dr. Baker take her first stab at it, and she combined bits and pieces that she appreciated from the various ones. She also used some other resources that were that talked much more about superintendent standards and pieces that they really had to attend to, so that the statutes. This really pulls everything in. A couple pieces that I want to draw people's attention to is on page 3. We did have that the board chair should present the first draft of the superintendent's evaluation in a regular scheduled board meeting before the board's reorganization meeting. So that means that we would do an evaluation of our superintendent before the board reorganizes in March. Now you're all thinking, she just started. How are we going to do this? Well, very quickly and with as much efficiency and professionalism as we can in this short period of time. You also remember that when we talked about these various documents, that Dr. Baker kind of tossed out some suggestions as to what she thought goals may possibly be for the ensuing few months that this first go round would work for. All right. We also have in it that the executive committee would be the ones that get to go back and meet with the superintendent once the board has given all their bits and pieces and input to the entire form. We would take all of that, compile it, and have a meeting with the superintendent about it. And all of that would be done, we said by April 30th, but in reality, it's probably going to be done before then.
Right.
Because if you remember correctly, there's an election in March, not the one in November, there's one in March. So in March, we may switch over board members, which then makes it a lot more difficult for new board members to have input in what the superintendent's been doing for the last almost a year at that point, because they haven't been here. They've been able to see from the peripheral, but not really in the everyday working. So hoping to have that done. The summative performance assessment, which is on page 5, came from the Ladue Schools document. A little bit of massaging there. The Lincoln Public Schools starts. Some of it was pulled on page 6 and throughout. So it's our document now, compiled from everyone else's documents. And we felt the 4 of us sat down, we read through it, thought it made a lot of sense, thought it was a great place to start. We'll try it this year. And who knows, maybe after we do our first evaluation, we'll say, ooh, we really missed, we missed the boat on this section here. So we might have to tweak it. But we would like the board to give its approval to this document so that we could remove the word draft and use it for this year. And then if we need to tweak it, through the process, we'll note any tweaks that need to be made and retweak, rework, and update, if that makes sense to everyone.
Thank you, Suzanne. Yep. Chip.
I was looking all of the areas of performance with the 4 categories of many things. How are those blanks filled in? Who's filling them in?
That's part of the process.
Well, I understand that, but I mean, I can't imagine a board of 13 people trying to come in agreement on every one of these things along the way. Now, maybe it would work that way.
So in my thoughts, 13 of us could sit and read down through these and say, standards under F, community external relations. The first one projects a positive image of the school district and elicits respect within the community and among peers.
So we're going to debate all of these.
No,
No,
we're going to do them individually.
we're going to do them individually,
Okay.
and then you
And
could
somebody collates them?
collate
Yeah,
them,
all right.
and then
Well, fine. That's all. That was my
no,
my
that
question.
would be a very long
Would
meeting.
be a very
We've
long
done
and
this
tedious
before,
meeting
and
because it just wouldn't work.
I think we'd need to start now.
That was my only question.
Yeah, so that's kind of our thoughts, but we would like your approval to start using this so that we can try to have something accomplished and done before March.
Mary Heather.
Well, I just want to point out a couple things. I believe in the summative evaluation, it says the executive committee, and this is on page 4.
Yep.
The executive committee will develop a process for requesting feedback from board members, direct reports, or so. This speaks to exactly what you're asking.
Exactly.
Okay, I
Chip.
just
So like,
didn't memorize it.
potentially this could be translated into like a Google form by which everybody fills in their responses, and then we can collate it in a much more efficient fashion than a meeting like this.
Okay.
And then the other thing, just to follow up on Suzanne's point about the April 30th date, we put April 30th in there because obviously we'd like to have this done before March, before the whole election and reorganization that happens. But we also want to be realistic about the work that is also happening at the board level with respect to budgeting, and that sometimes we have to meet several times to get the budget done and ready and warned and everything. And so we tried to build in a little bit of buffer time just to be realistic and still be kind of in compliance with what we're proposing on the evaluation process.
Steve? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to shut down the debate, but I just want to put the motion on the floor. Make a motion that we approve the tool for use with superintendent evaluation.
Thank you.
If I can.
Yes, you can. It's allowed. Any other discussion? Okay, so let's take a vote. All those in favor of our using this document as the procedure and the tool for the superintendent evaluation for the short term, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Yay. Thank you. Next is report of the board, and we have 2 items on here that Tricia will
Yep.
be reporting on.
Couple of things from Communication and Engagement Committee. Number 1, reminder, please email me about October 22nd.
Yes.
Next, A21 public comment procedure approval. At the very end of last school year, you guys saw this draft procedure for A21, which has to do with public participation at board meetings. We realized that we never officially tied this off. So we all looked at it and said that we would officially approve it at the beginning of this year. And then we didn't come back and do that. So we are putting it back in front of you, hopefully to do the official, yes, this looks good. Most of this has already gone into effect this year. So talking about the 3-minute time limits, appointing timekeepers, keeping a list of speakers if needed. A couple of things that we will need to remember to do moving forward would be having printed copies of the agenda for the public.
Right.
And then we've already gone to both of the comment periods being open to any topic. And then there's one part that we have not implemented yet, which is board meeting agendas will also include an opportunity for board reflection at the end of the meeting, during which time board members may briefly discuss and consider issues raised and or comments shared during the public comment periods. Public comment matters requiring further discussion or action will be scheduled and warned for a future board meeting.
So we've done a little of that.
We've done a little bit.
Yeah.
We've had our board reflection, but more in a manner of how we've been doing, self-evaluation, as opposed to an opportunity to, hey, we had 7 comments right at the beginning about this, and I do think it's something that we should talk about further, or things like that.
Okay.
I don't know that it has been much of an issue so far this year, but that being something that has not been common practice so far, that would be a change moving forward.
So can we have an action? Can we have a motion? Yes.
So are we approving this policy then?
The
It's
procedure.
not policy,
It's a procedure.
Oh, I see.
It's a procedure to accompany
Policy
For
A21.
policy. Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it's just more details about how.
Yeah.
public
So we're
comment will work.
consistent. We're consistently
Yeah.
doing it.
Which you don't normally do that with procedures, but given
Yeah.
that these are board procedures, I think it really represents your consensus about how to go about things in that way. So it's a bit of a different animal.
Right. And it doesn't have the same warn it to get twice.
Yeah.
That it's not a
Yeah.
policy, so it's a
Right.
different
No,
setup.
and a second question, would this apply to all, because it says board meetings, does this apply to committee meetings as well? Because I know that some committees don't organize themselves this way, with a 2-comment period. And so would this be just the main board meeting, or would it be committee meetings as well?
It says board meetings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my thought and understanding was all board
All board
meetings. And I
meetings,
had
okay.
thought that board meetings were doing 2, but
Committee meetings
Okay.
do have 2 public comment
I
periods.
think all
Sorry.
the agendas are
The agendas all have 2 public.
They
The
don't tend
Facilities
to-
Committee did not.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting, because finance and
yes, Amy has.
well, but
And
that's why
policy both do.
we have this wonderful
That's why we
policy.
need to have
so now
Yeah.
Okay, so we're interusing our language.
Not
This is
policy,
actually a
procedure. Sorry, thank you, Suzanne.
So with that in mind, can I amend, should we amend this to say,
We
First,
don't
we
have
would
a
need to have a
motion on the
motion.
We need a
table,
motion,
so then you can amend.
okay,
So-
so I
Motion
can
to
I would
adopt.
like a motion to adopt this procedure for policy A21.
Okay. Is there a
second
second? Okay, Ellie's a second.
Great.
Okay, now discussion.
I have a question. So can we amend this this procedure to say public participation at board meetings and committee meetings?
Board meetings policy.
It's-
It's expressed in its public participation at board meetings, which is policy 821.
Yeah.
The ACS in public in its meetings, blah, 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 blah.
Well,
So-
it's 821.
To include committee meetings? Would that make sense?
As
Because-
You
It's-
also have to alter rather to say board chair, you would also have to say.
Committee chair.
Committee chair.
Well, I mean, A21 just says board meetings.
Yeah.
Board
Yeah.
meetings.
And so it should be consistent with A21.
Mhm.
I would leave it.
I think I would leave it. And there should be an understanding that a committee meeting is a board meeting.
I mean, it later says comments and
Okay.
questions presented by stakeholders during the public comment period of committee meetings and board meetings will be recorded in the meeting minutes, blah, blah, blah.
It does say that here.
So you can say the board chair or committee chair, board or committee chair will grant a 3-minute time limit. So Jamie, I guess, are you just proposing that we edit this to more clearly, explicitly state committee?
I was just
meetings?
trying to make it, with reality. And I understand the point about it reflecting policy 821, which is, I think, a good idea. But if we can either just add in what you just said, board chairs or committee chairs, and or all of us, accept that a committee meeting is a board meeting, then that's fine.
The simple way would be to say chair instead of board chair.
Right,
Okay,
right. That's,
Okay.
yeah,
that's easy.
Okay. Yeah.
So you made a motion to amend it to,
I didn't,
well, or no, we haven't
is
done
just
that.
this is just discussion.
It's just
Right.
discussion. Do we need amendment to do that? Or can we just accept the
I mean, as
change?
far as I'm concerned, sure.
Well, I would think
But
that
I'm
since
not-
Jamie made the motion, he could amend his own motion.
Okay, fine. I will amend the motion to edit the procedure as Tricia just outlined, as described by Steve.
No, you have to be explicit. You can't do
To
that.
delete the word board before the word chair
Yeah.
in the second paragraph.
Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. All of those in favor of discussion. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to rush this.
Yeah.
Any more discussion
I
on
just
that?
have one brief, all along I've been a little bit resistant about opening up to everything, okay?
Yeah.
At both ends. So
Yeah.
I still honestly feel we have many, many ways that public can interact with board, including at the meetings. They can call us, they can email us, they can stop us in the street, they can do a lot of things. I realize all of that's not perfect, but I still think, meeting like this doesn't make any difference because it's not anything that draws that kind of public interest or discussion. But other times it can be overwhelming potentially. And if we're there for work, it can be a problem. So I'm just not in favor of the communication, but not the open-ended on the opening, the opening comment. So.
Any other discussion?
So may I ask Chip a question?
Yes.
So Chip, I'm just trying to put this together in my brain that's not
Right.
functioning at this point in time.
Yes.
Are you saying that you're not in favor of the second public comment that's on anything, or are you not in favor
not
of the
having
board
the first public
reflecting
Not
on
in
the
favor of the
comment?
first public comment being open-ended, all right?
Not specific to agenda
The second
items.
comment
Right.
many times are the public commenting on our board meeting, okay?
Mhm.
Exemplified by a member who often comes.
Mhm.
But it's not just that, but it's just that it opens it up and they do have, public then has that. So I'm just, I'm being consistent with what I said all along, so.
Ellen and then Ellie.
Ellen?
I mean, I hear you, Chip. I just feel like people, in the times when people have come in large numbers or any numbers to talk to us about things that are not on the agenda, they stay to their credit and they wait, and we hear it one way or another. So letting people say at the beginning of the meeting or the end of the meeting, I don't think much matters, except that then people get to come and express themselves, and they can go on with their night and we can go on with our night. And then it's whether it happens at the beginning or the end.
For me, this is a matter of equity too, like, and being fair to we wanted students to feel welcome to come to these meetings and make comments, and it's not really open to them if they have to wait until late at night when they wouldn't be allowed to be out of bed.
After 9:30. But also to that's part of why I think we've been a lot better at keeping to the 3-minute time limit, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's that compromise that yes, now this first block is open to any topic, and we are going to be much more aware of keeping to our speaking times and making sure, we're conducting business in a structured manner.
May I ask you a question?
Yes.
So what happens?
Mhm.
I'll throw out the devil's advocate.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens if some board meeting we end up with, well, we used to have, a couple hundred people at annual meeting. And if they all decide they wanted to speak
Mm-hmm.
at 3 minutes,
Yep.
does the board chair have the right, given this new procedure, to alter the 3-minute time limit because there's so many people that want to speak? I mean, 3 minutes, if you had 100 people there,
Yep.
that's 300 minutes, which is 5 hours.
If someone wanted to stay for that. Well, so
I'm just wondering. That's all.
The way it's currently written, no. It's a 3-minute time limit, and we can create a speakers list. So we'd, people would have to sign up if we had that many people. If the board feels like that's a legitimate concern, we can definitely add verbiage to here saying, that
I think the statute
comment.
allows for that. If I remember,
Robert's rules does allow for it,
Yeah.
but I'm just wondering if you put it in.
exactly.
procedure
Because of
there.
that, yeah.
Joanna, what did you say?
I just was noticing the guarantee fairness. It does indicate 3-minute time limit, but it also gives the chair discretion to guarantee
Right.
fairness. And if that is deemed something that is going to be unfair, then
Right. And so then you allow everyone the same amount. That's a minute or 2 minutes.
based on the
What it doesn't do is put any governor on the amount of your meeting that will be public comment.
Right.
So, because if you've got 100 people, even
You're
if
still
they're
gonna-
talking every minute apiece, then you're
That's
at 100 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
Hour and a half.
yeah, so it doesn't allow for that, which you could have in your procedure if you chose to. No, public comment period will not last longer than this amount of time under any circumstances.
I generally think it's not a great practice to make policy or procedure based on a worst case scenario that has not happened in a very, very long time, because I just don't think that's a great practice.
Well, and I wonder too, and to me, one of the jobs of the board is to hear our constituency, right? And so part of the business to get done in these meetings is listening to public comment and hearing what people have to say to us and what is important enough to them to show up and talk to us, right? So, I feel like that is the work of the board. And if there are 100 people who feel like it is so important for them to come here and take up their time and our time to tell us whatever, then that's a message that we probably need to hear.
And we should be so lucky if 100 people are come to these meetings.
Right.
Well, I was just going to say,
I think,
Yeah.
move along and
So yes,
vote on the motion
can
to
we
amend
call the question?
So we're voting on the motion to remove board. Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying? Okay.
All those in favor of removing the word
Board
board
from
and
the
just
second
have chair,
paragraph.
please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, now we can vote on, unless there's more discussion. Hopefully not. I shouldn't say that. I'm shutting it down. So now we can vote on the procedure with that change. And so, ready for that question?
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the procedure for policy 21 with the minor
As amended.
as amended, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
One abstention.
Okay, it's
I
passed.
never abstained, but I did in this.
Yeah.
You're still wonderful,
First
Chip.
time.
No, I don't want to vote against it because I understand
Yeah.
everybody's argument, but
Yeah.
you haven't convinced me.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, that's fair.
Okay.
100 people in here.
And thank you to the Communication Engagement Committee for doing that work. So next.
So part 2 of communications and engagement it's time for our fall update letter to go out. So you have a copy of that letter in board pack and in our meeting materials, School Board News Fall 2024. Please look over it. And if you have any edits that you would like us to incorporate, our communications and engagement committee meeting is tomorrow at 4:30.
No pressure.
So when you email me tonight about October 22nd, you can also include any edits that you might like the committee to include in our fall 2024 school board news letter. Thank you to the committee chairs for getting me your updates. Those have been included in the bottom of the letter. Some of them were wordsmithed. If you don't like how we wrote things, let us know. Otherwise, I'm not going to take any more of our time.
By
Okay.
tomorrow, I think we need to.
Yeah, we
comments
do need it by tomorrow.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so for real,
So we can move this along.
when you email me tonight about October 22nd, by the way, you guys, October 22nd, I hope you have the night free.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
That's it.
Moving on. Next on our agenda is our second public comment period. Is there anyone in the room or online that would like to make a public comment? Of course. And I'm not going to read my whole statement.
That's okay. I'll
And-
set my time
Thank you. Thank you.
for the procedure. Okay, so Mary Solzar from Waybridge. I have a lot of things I want to share, as you might imagine, given tonight's topic. First, I wanted to follow up on one thing that a lot of people have spoken about is this tension about needs and obligations and budgets. And I just wanted to highlight, Joanna started to allude to this, that Act 173 requires districts to implement universally designed learning for the purpose of relieving that tension. So I think it would be great in budget discussions to be thinking as a team and as a district, how are we moving our district towards real meaningful UDL, not just in literacy, but across the board. And hopefully we will be lessening our needs in specialized instruction. So that feels like a big one to keep on the radar. Other things, I wanted to just point out some facts that I think might clarify some of the concerns people were reacting to. One, I want to make sure everyone needs to know that the numbers that Nicole was pointing out are percentages of IEPs. They reflect eligibility categories. They do not reflect need. An eligibility category is what gets you in the door to have an IEP. It does not dictate what your needs are or what services or supports you're going to receive. There are tons of kids who need mental health services that do not have IEPs. There are tons of kids who are on these types of IEPs that may not need mental health services, as however that's defined. Also, it only reflects single IEP categories. Tons of children, including my own, have more than one IEP category. So you're missing a lot of information. So I just call that out so you don't interpret too much into the numbers that you were seeing there. Also, I think it's important, I think there was some confusion about denominators. The denominator in here is IEPs, not students. So that 30%, the concern is that most of our kids with IEPs are being categorized as ED and OHI. OHI is not that concerning. ED is. But just so you know, in terms of IEPs in general, we are not a weird state. We have 18% of our students qualify for IEPs compared to 15% nationally, 21% in Maine, 21% in New York. So just for some perspective. So the concern is, why are so many of our students with IEPs being put into these categories? Not why do we have so many kids qualifying for IEPs? Those are facts, not fact, more of a assessment. A lot of parents and other advocates in the special education space make a big deal about this ED categorization in particular. Vermont is unique in this way. And from where I sit and where others sit on this side, it seems to be driven by misdiagnoses, a lack of understanding of our children, not identifying their learning disabilities and instead saying that they are disturbed or have some behavior problem, when really they just might not be getting their other needs met. Or maybe having an idea of autism as Rain Man in a 1990s perception of autism, not what we understand autism to be today. So I could share a lot more. I think it's really important for you all to understand these things. I would be more than happy to talk about it with any of you. But it's an important topic. I'm so glad Nicole is highlighting our mental health needs. That's not a special education issue. That's a global issue. And I'm also very grateful that you all are concerned. But I think there's some level setting to be done about the problem. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, any other online? Okay, moving on to board reflection. And tonight, Allie has agreed to give a quick reflection on the meeting, that mini part of the reflection.
Yeah. So I was thinking about tonight, the word that comes to mind is cooperation. I felt like this meeting, we all worked really well as a team. And I wanted to do one other thing, which is something I end my meetings at work, where everyone goes around and says one word that reflects their meeting tonight. So for me, it was cooperation, but maybe we can go around and just say one word.
I wasn't prepared for this
assignment.
I apologize.
I thought tonight to be quite educational. Actually, I feel like I learned a lot tonight. Educational.
Dense.
Matt, do you feel like sharing a word?
Not yet.
Two words.
Can't
Keep
rush
going.
it. Can't rush it.
I would second the educational.
Okay.
Informative.
Stressful.
Engaged.
Yeah. Long.
Yeah, I guess
That's one way to put it.
intentional.
This is hard. Kind of gratitude from a chair perspective, for how
One word.
gratitude.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's quite a
I've been
lot.
out for a
I
very
know.
long time.
It's quite all right.
My day in Oregon today.
Yeah.
I would say it's nice to see so much dedication highlighted from all fronts, many fronts, in these areas. Dedication.
I'm gonna take a word from Matt, called budget drivers, that's hyphenated, so it's one word.
Ready now.
I'll go with informative.
Does the audience want to throw out a word?
All right.
Okay. Thank you, Ellie. Ellie, did you have any more? No. Okay, thank you. Okay, so a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for being awesome. Matt, just turn on the